welcome to the first episode of my Artisan Brewery modding tutorial series. And so in the first episode, we will cover all the free tools you can use or the tools that I use for my mods. And if you want to know more about this whole mod series, I made an introductory video that will cover what we will do and roughly the structure of the whole thing. So I recommend you check that out if you want to know more. But now, so let's start covering what tools that we need. So let's start with the programming tools. The very first tool we should use is Visual Studio Community Edition. So this is the free version of Visual Studio. And so it's a programming tool made by Microsoft. And to get this, and this is like pretty much what everyone uses for C# programming. So you should definitely get this. And once you start the installation process, you will eventually get to a view that looks something like this. You will have to choose your features for Visual Studio since it has a lot of different development environments. For our purposes, the only thing that really matters for Bannerlord modding is the .NET desktop environment. So I have some other things selected here, but I can even just disable them and select just the .NET desktop development environment. And in the optional, I can also disable some of these, but it doesn't really matter too much. You can select additional framework versions here and stuff like that. But the things that really matter are that you have IntelliCode and just-in-time debugger. Other than that, you can just go ahead and do whatever, or go ahead with the installation process once you have the .NET desktop tools. On top of Visual Studio, which has its own editor, text editor, of course, I also use two other text editors. So I use Notepad++, and this one I use for, I have my own system of using 3 text editors. So I use Notepad++ when I want to open reference files. So files that I'm not actively modifying, that are not part of my project. And then I have third text editor, which is Visual Studio Code. And the way I use this one is that I open it in the folder with my XML files, and I use Visual Studio Code for editing the XML. And then I use Visual Studio for editing the code files. And you can have your own system for managing all the different editing views and stuff, but I like my 3 editor setup, and all these are fairly good programs. So I can just quickly show. So I go to the modules folder, and then I can open, I have this context menu set up so that I can open this folder with code like this. You don't have to do things exactly the same way that I do, but then I use this view to browse all the asset XML files. This way there's kind of like separation of programs between like the actual Visual Studio, which I use for the code editing, and the other tools that I use for editing the XML. Just makes it a bit easier for me to move around the different windows and views. And one more programming tool that we are going to use is DNSpy, which is a .NET reverse engineering tool. And this is another one that you will get from GitHub. So we'll just find the DNSpy GitHub page and go to the latest releases and just extract this to wherever you will find it. And later on, I will have a whole episode dedicated to just how to use this tool. But for now, this is just reverse engineering tool that we will use to figure out how the game actually works. Since there is very little official documentation, this will be pretty much mandatory. And then, so I want to also show you how you install the Bannerlord modding kit. So the modding kit is used for importing asset files such as 3D models or animations into your mod. And it also has a scene editor, which can be used to create maps like villages or battlefields or arenas. And I will not cover the scene editor in this tutorial. There is already really good scene editor tutorial on YouTube related to the Kingdoms of Arda project. But I will show how to import assets. And as far as I know, the editor is only available through the Steam distribution at the moment. So if you have some other version, unfortunately, you need to have the game on Steam. But maybe if you don't have it, maybe you can team up with someone else who has it. And anyway, you can do almost everything we do without the official modding kit. It's just importing the assets part, which will not be possible without it. To install the modding kit, you should come here in your library and make sure you have tools enabled. And then once you have tools enabled, you should be able to see the Bannerlord modding kit here in your library. And you can just install it from here. When you launch it, it will pop up this launcher that looks very much like the regular launcher. And then you select the mod that you're working on from here and click play, and it will actually open the editor and not the game. But we will look at that a bit later. And also there was a question about setting the beta version. So for example, I have, so the way you set up beta in Steam is just right click on the game in your properties, come here, set the beta to, in this case, 1.7.2, which is the latest version. But that is how you get to the latest beta. And it's also important that you have the same version in your modding kit. Although I think it somehow magically auto updates the two. I'm not quite sure how that works, but it seems like it will automatically pick the right version for the modding kit. More tools that I want to introduce. I will be using something called ripgrep, which is a file search program. And the way you install this one is you go to the GitHub and click releases on the right, go down and find most likely the Windows version. And then you have to unpack it somewhere. So I put it in my user folder. I've just unpacked it here. But this is actually a command line program. To actually use it easily, you need to go to your environment variables. So I go to the Windows search, I type environment variables or something like that. Bring up this environment variables view, and you need to add this to your path variable. So there's path for system and path for user. It doesn't matter really which one you put it in. Only difference is that these ones will only work when you're on your user. So I select my path and I add the wherever I unpacked the ripgrep here in my path. What this does is that it brings all the executables inside this folder to view, to a global view. So when I open PowerShell, wherever I am, I can just type rg and press tab to complete it to the rg.x. And this is, by the way, PowerShell, which is just a command line for Windows. It should be installed by default in your Windows. So to open this, I also just press start and type PowerShell, and I can open new Windows. So now that I have this directory in my path environment variable, get this ripgrep in my I can easily use this executable wherever I am on the command line. And the way I actually use this is that so this is a text search program. So I go to the modules like this. I copy the path and I paste it in quotes. And the way I actually use this is that I search data from the XMLs. So let's say I don't remember something about the Tailworlds has this own HTML-like layout language. So if I don't remember how something works, I can just search for layout, and I get this nice view of all the places where basically layout is written somewhere. So this is extremely useful when you don't remember how something works exactly. And I will use this many times. So I recommend you set this up if you plan to do any XML editing or plan to do any UI of your own. So again, I just unpack the files, unpack the program wherever, and then I come to my environment variables and set the path to include this one. Then other tools that I will use are Blender for the 3D editing or editing the 3D objects. So Blender is a great program. And if you install it, you will get to something that looks like this. And I will cover very basics of 3D editing later. But right now, if you get to something that looks like this, you are at the correct position or far along enough. But this should be easy to download and easy to install. Very straightforward. Then another asset tool is GIMP, which we will use for 2D editing. So you could use this to edit textures. I will probably not do texture editing in this tutorial series, but we will use GIMP shortly to edit our UI sprites, which are 2D assets for the UI. And if you're familiar with Photoshop, I recommend you keep using Photoshop. GIMP is not better in any way. I think it's maybe worse than Photoshop in some ways, but it's free, and all the tools in this list are free. So I will use GIMP for the sprite editing. And then final tool for this list will be the BUTR theme module template. So if you search for BUTR Mod Template, this is a bit confusing. It's actually this second one, which is the correct one. And this is what we will use to create our project and set up some nice things in the very beginning. So we will actually go through what this template does. But first, we need to get it working. And the way you install this is you open your command line of choice, and in this case, PowerShell. You copy this line, and then it is already installed. If you have Visual Studio, you have to have Visual Studio installed first, but then this should just work. But to also utilize this well, there's additional steps that you need to do. So here it says Bannerlord GameDir is an environment variable. So we think that it would be best to set this once on a system instead of hard coding the game path every time. So this recommends that you set this environment variable. And environment variables are just things that we were editing just a few moments ago. So we go back to, let's open this again. So let's go back to environment variables. Come here, and you see I have added this Bannerlord game directory environment variable as a new variable. So this is also something that you should do to utilize this this mod template effectively. And this will make it so that you can, if you have this variable set up right, so you can basically just any mods that I have made with this system will just work right away on your system. Your solution, the Visual Studio solution, will find all the correct files it needs automatically based on this environment variable, which points it to your game directory. So this system works quite nicely. And also, so now I guess I can create my own module already. So this will be called Artisan Beer. So this is my mod name, and this will create. Oh, actually, I need to first I will go to my mods directory, which is where I actually put all my mod files. So this is inside my user directory and not in the actual Bannerlord modules yet. Okay, so I will name my mod and just create the files. And I can type Explorer. I can Explorer Artisan Beer to open up this folder. Now we can see what this mod template actually created for us. So it made a very simple C# file, which is basically just a stub where we can start typing our code. And it created properties file for the Visual Studio, which will set up the correct command line arguments to start the game, which is very useful. And setting up this yourself every time you want to create a new project, it's kind of silly. This is the most complicated part. One thing this also does is creates a submodule XML file for yourself. So for your project. So submodule XML is something that every mod needs to have. So this template just creates one for you, which is kind of empty in the beginning, but it has all this boilerplate. And if you want, you can write all of this yourself, and maybe you should do it once, but I recommend that pretty quickly you switch to using this mod template anyway. So now we can just start this up in Visual Studio. And if you have the game directory set up correctly, the environment variable, at this point, you should see that this mod template is configured so that the default target is already like launching Bannerlord. And it will find all the game files, and you should be able to just start it immediately right here. And this will attach debugger to the game, and it's already running your mod. So one thing this also does, the launch settings that they have set up in this mod template, it also has this command line argument which starts the game with your mod enabled. So we can already see that if we attach debugger, so if we go to the actual code here, we already have a debugger attached. So if I come to the code file and put a breakpoint here, so this red dot is, I click here to add a breakpoint. So breakpoint is just something where the Visual Studio will stop the execution when it reaches that point. So you can already see that this breakpoint is hit. So that means that it is actually executing our mod code already. So everything is set up correctly if you get to this point. So the template is very useful because it gives you the submodule XML, and it sets up this launch settings so that you get the debugger correctly. And so our code in this case is in my user directory, but the mod template is also set up so that it will copy all the files when you launch. So when I click launch here, or I click rebuild solution, for example, we'll build all the program files, and it will package them, and the mod template is set up so that it will copy everything to the modules directory. So it has to actually create this modules directory in the game modules. So this is where the mod template will copy all the DLLs and stuff, and it will create this submodule XML here. And we can look what it has written here. So it has written all this boilerplate XML dependent modules. This mod depends on all the default modules, and this is how everything just seems like it's magically working, but it is because the mod template has this submodule XML set up already for us. So that is very useful. And so now we have all the text editors we need. We have the code editor, we have 3D modeling tools, we have texture editing tools, and we have we have our text search tool to search stuff um, from the XML files already in the game in the form of grep. And we have this module template, which we can use to quickly create new projects, new toy projects, test projects, or actual mods, whatever. Since it will be easy to create new ones, you can do it more often, and you don't have to set up the debugger path and all that stuff every time again. Maybe you want to once do this submodule XML by hand just to see what there is, but it's mostly not very important or very interesting. So your choice. So these are all the free tools you can use to create your mods, and the free tools I use to create my mods. And I can fully recommend using each of these, and they are completely free. Maybe only GIMP is maybe something that many professionals don't use. Maybe, I don't know, maybe there are some professionals who prefer GIMP even. But Blender is very professional tool. Visual Studio is, of course, the thing that almost everyone uses in Windows world. So these are very good tools, I think. So yeah, I think those are all the tools that we need or we should use to make everything go smoothly. So thank you for watching the first part of this mod tutorial series. Those are all the tools you need, and we have our project set up, and we have confirmed that it's actually running by putting a breakpoint in there. So now we can actually get to modifying stuff and adding more content to the game. Thank you very much.